Have you ever wondered how the UDSSR, a superpower that once rivaled the United States, came into existence? Our tale begins in the early 20th century, in the turbulent aftermath of the Russian Civil War. The war, which raged from late 1917 to 1922, was a brutal conflict that saw the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, rise to power. This was a time of seismic change and upheaval, a time when the old world was swept away, and a new order was forged in the crucible of revolution. The Bolsheviks, whose name means majority in Russian, had a vision of a communist society. They believed in a world where the workers ruled, where the means of production were owned by the people, and where the shackles of the old order were cast off. It was a vision that resonated with many, especially those who had long suffered under the yoke of the Tsarist regime. But it was not a vision that came to fruition without struggle. The path to power was paved with hardship, sacrifice, and conflict. The Russian Civil War was a bitter and bloody affair, pitting brother against brother, comrade against comrade. But out of this crucible of conflict, a new nation was born. On December 30th, 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or UDSSR, was formally established. The Bolsheviks, with Lenin at the helm, had succeeded in their revolutionary endeavor, but the journey was far from over. Lenin's death in 1924 would pave the way for another key figure to take the reins, Joseph Stalin. Stalin's influence would not only shape the UDSSR, but would also cast a long shadow over the course of world history. The birth of the UDSSR was more than just the creation of a new nation. It was a seismic shift in global politics, a transformation that would reverberate across the globe. The UDSSR was not just a country. It was a symbol, a beacon for those who believed in the promise of communism, and a formidable adversary for those who stood against it. The formation of the UDSSR marked the start of an era that would shape global politics for the better part of the 20th century. Following Lenin's death in 1924, Joseph Stalin rose to power, marking a turning point in the UDSSR's history. Stalin, a name meaning man of steel, took the reins of a country still reeling from the impacts of revolution and civil war. During his reign, Stalin introduced a series of ambitious policies aimed at rapidly industrializing the Soviet Union and transforming it into a global superpower. He launched the first of several five-year plans in 1928, which set high production targets for heavy industry. However, these plans came at a heavy cost. Many workers were forced to live in harsh conditions, and millions of peasants were dispossessed of their land during the collectivization of agriculture. Then came the Great Purge, also known as the Great Terror. From 1936 to 1938, Stalin embarked on a campaign of political repression to consolidate his power. He targeted perceived enemies of the Soviet Union, including members of the Communist Party, the Red Army, and intellectuals. Hundreds of thousands were executed or sent to forced labor camps, leaving a deep scar on the nation's psyche. Stalin's leadership also had significant impacts on the UDSSR's culture and society. His regime promoted a cult of personality, with Stalin portrayed as a wise and benevolent leader. He also implemented policies to promote Soviet nationalism, suppress religious institutions, and control education and the arts. Yet despite the hardships and horrors of his rule, Stalin did manage to transform the UDSSR into a formidable industrial power. His policies laid the groundwork for the Soviet Union's significant role in the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. However, the human cost of Stalin's reign was staggering. Millions perished from famine, forced labor, and political repression. His policies also created a climate of fear and mistrust that would linger for decades. Stalin's reign was a time of great change and turmoil, setting the stage for the events to come. When World War II broke out, the UDSSR found itself drawn into the conflict, playing a significant role. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or UDSSR, was not an initial participant in the war. However, the sudden attack by Nazi Germany in June of 1941, known as Operation Barbarossa, triggered the Soviet Union's entry into the fray. The UDSSR's involvement in World War II was marked by several significant battles and sieges, each shaping the course of the conflict and the nation's own destiny. One of the most pivotal confrontations was the Battle of Stalingrad. Named after the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, this city became the stage for one of the deadliest battles in human history. Lasting from August 1942 to February 1943, it was a testament to the Soviet Union's resilience and determination. The Battle of Stalingrad ended with the surrender of the German Sixth Army, marking a turning point in the war. The victory boosted the morale of the Soviet people and military, signaling that the tide of the war was beginning to turn in favor of the Allies. Another significant episode was the Siege of Leningrad. This was not a battle in the traditional sense, but a prolonged blockade by German and Finnish forces. It lasted a harrowing 872 days, from September 1941 to January 1944. The city's inhabitants endured extreme hardships, suffering from cold, hunger, and constant bombardments. Yet, in the face of these challenges, the city did not fall, and its resistance became a symbol of Soviet endurance. These notable events underscored the UDSSR's significant role in World War II. The Soviet Union bore a heavy toll, with millions of lives lost, but its contributions were instrumental in the defeat of Nazi Germany. It emerged from the war as a superpower, its international standing greatly enhanced. The UDSSR's involvement in World War II had a profound impact, both domestically and internationally. The war changed the Soviet Union in many ways, shaping its future and leaving an indelible mark on its history. In the aftermath of World War II, the world entered a new era known as the Cold War, with the UDSSR and the United States as the two superpowers. The UDSSR, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, played a pivotal role in this intense period of geopolitical tension. The Cold War was not a traditional war. Instead, it was a battle of ideologies, pitting capitalism against communism, each side vying for global supremacy. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Cold War was the space race. It was a technological duel on an interstellar stage, with the UDSSR taking the early lead. The Soviets made history when they launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, in 1957. 4 years later, they achieved another monumental feat when Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth. These triumphs were not just technological achievements, they were symbolic victories, showcasing the might of the Soviet system to the world. But the Cold War was not only about reaching the stars. Back on Earth, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The UDSSR's decision to place nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the US coast, resulted in a 13-day standoff that is often considered the closest the world has ever come to nuclear war. The arms race, another prominent feature of the Cold War, saw the UDSSR and the US build up massive arsenals of nuclear weapons. This constant escalation, fueled by mutual fear and suspicion, kept the world on edge for decades. The Cold War was a time of great tension and uncertainty, but it was also a time of great innovation and change. And throughout this era, the UDSSR was a key player, driving many of the developments that defined the period. The Cold War era saw the UDSSR at the height of its power, with its influence felt around the globe. Despite its might, the UDSSR was not invincible. By the late 20th century, it was on the brink of collapse. This was a superpower that had once stretched across 11 time zones, from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean. Yet a multitude of factors conspired to bring about its downfall. Economic struggles were central to the UDSSR's unraveling. The command economy, once hailed as a marvel of socialist planning, was buckling under the weight of inefficiency, corruption, and a lack of innovation. Shortages of basic goods became commonplace, and the standard of living for ordinary citizens began to plummet. The country's vast military-industrial complex, once a source of national pride, was draining resources at an unsustainable rate. Meanwhile, political unrest simmered beneath the surface. The UDSSR was a federation of republics, each with its own distinct culture, language, and history. As economic conditions worsened, these republics began to assert their desire for greater autonomy, even independence. The Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania led the way, followed by others. In this climate of crisis, one figure rose to the fore: Mikhail Gorbachev. Taking office as the General Secretary of the Communist Party in 1985, Gorbachev sought to reform the system from within. His policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, or restructuring, were intended to modernize the UDSSR. But in practice, they hastened its demise. Under Gorbachev, the media gained unprecedented freedoms, leading to a surge of criticism against the government. At the same time, political reforms loosened the Communist Party's grip on power, paving the way for the emergence of a multi-party system. The genie was out of the bottle, and there was no putting it back. Finally, on December 26, 1991, the UDSSR was officially dissolved, replaced by the Russian Federation and 14 other independent states. The fall of the UDSSR marked the end of an era, reshaping the geopolitical landscape. Suddenly, the world was a very different place. The superpower that had stood for more than 7 decades was no more. The history of the UDSSR is a tale of power, conflict, and change. A superpower was born out of the ashes of revolution, embodying the aspirations of a new world order. Its reign, under the iron fist of Stalin, was marked by sweeping social reforms, but also by an era of terror and repression. When the world was engulfed in the flames of World War II, the UDSSR played a pivotal role in shaping the outcome, and in the process, further cemented its place on the world stage. The Cold War era saw the superpower in a constant chess match of strategy and power with its Western counterparts. Yet, even the mightiest empires fall, and so did the UDSSR, marking the end of an era. Understanding this history offers valuable insights into the world we live in today, as the legacy of the UDSSR continues to have a profound impact.